Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome to my channel for the best video of the entire year. So this is my yearly wrap up of the very best nonfiction that I read in the year of 2025. If you missed it, I already did a video of my best fiction that I read in the year 2025, but now this is all about nonfiction. Now this list was long. I had a lot of 5-star books that still are just floating around in my head, influencing how I see the world, really opening my eyes to really important and interesting issues. And this was a struggle. I narrowed it down to 25 amazing books. These were 5-star reads, and not all of my 5-star nonfiction, but the ones that have really made a difference and that I just think everyone would love to read. So let's jump into these books that I have read. This first book that I am going to talk about is a personal memoir, and I didn't think when I got into it that this would make it on any of my favorite lists, but this book was really well done and just opened my eyes up to a perspective that I found very relatable and very interesting. And so this was Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. And Fern Brady is a comedian, and I did listen to this as an audio, so you get her voice, and she has really humorous anecdotes, but her discussion of her own mental health and finding her autism diagnosis was just really interesting, and there were a lot of things that just were really well done. There are some trigger warnings in this book. She does talk about some really difficult situations and her time working as a stripper, so be aware of that going into the book, but I do think it was just really worth it for the discussion on her mental health, and it was really well done. I am excited to hear more from Fern Brady going into the future. Now, this next book is An Immense World, How Animal Senses Reveal the Hidden Realms Around Us by Ed Yong, and this is fun. If you like a good nature documentary sometimes, you want to understand different ways of seeing the world, this book really helps you with that. Something I really appreciated about it was just how it shows you how limited some of our own senses are and how the world is so much more complex and mysterious than we think. It really makes you feel such a sense of wonder about the world around you, and so I really liked this for the shift in perspective, the understanding that how I experience the world is probably not the objective truth. This next book is called Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End by Atul Gawande, and I recommend this book for anyone who is looking at end of life in either themselves or their loved ones. I think this book went through very personally a lot of the experiences and a lot of the options that people have in later life. What matters to you in the end? What quality of life makes life worth living to you personally, to your loved ones? This is something that I highly recommend that people read to understand not only what they want out of their life, especially in their later years when health might be declining, but also to discuss with loved ones to know how you can help them have a meaningful life up until the end. And I thought this was excellent, and not only was it well researched and well done by the author, but very personal for him, talking about his own experiences with his father. This was a beautiful book and just so important to consider. And so I really do recommend this to a lot of people. I tell people all the time, oh yes, you really should pick up Being Mortal. Oh, you're dealing with a parent with declining health. Oh, you're getting into older years. This is really worth a read to really figure out what your own priorities are and how you can help your loved ones. Now, this next book probably didn't move me as much as Being Mortal did, but I found so much of it so interesting that some of the little facts that came out of this book I end up talking about all the time. I really just brought one up the other day to my husband, like, oh, did you know this about this kind of bear? Anyways, this is 8 Bears, Mythic Past and Imperiled Future by Gloria, Dickie. And really, it is just going through 8 different types of bears, their history, their conservation efforts, and it's interesting. If you like wildlife writing, if you want to know more about different kinds of animals, I learned so much about bears through this, and it was just really interesting. And it wasn't just something that I read and thought, oh, that's interesting, and went away and forgot all about it. A lot of this has stuck with me, and I have remembered a lot of the facts. And so if you just want to learn about bears, this is a great one to pick up. This book is Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond, and this is talking about poverty in the United States. But not only does it explain some of the structures that keep people in poverty and explain what is happening, it does give you some solutions. And I love that in a book like this, it doesn't leave you feeling completely hopeless. There are things that can be done that can help people around us and help those people that we don't see, because the systems set in place keep us separated from those who are really suffering. And so I thought this was really an interesting look at poverty in the United States, really necessary if you live in the US. So I think this book gives you a lot of answers as to why things are the way they are, as well as some solutions. This book was Spain in Our Hearts, Americans in the Spanish Civil War, 1936 through 1939 by Adam Hochschild. And this is going through the Spanish Civil War. It does focus on the Americans that were in the Spanish Civil War, but I learned so much about the Spanish Civil War, which I was really, really appreciative of, because I do live in Spain, and having a little bit more background and context is always a good thing. But what really gets me about this book is just Adam Hochschild is amazing at nonfiction. He goes into depth. He studies everything. At this point, Adam Hochschild is an automatic pickup for me, and I highly recommend this book. I thought it was fascinating, compelling, and just super well researched. This book was The Art Thief, A True Story of Love, Crime, and a Dangerous Obsession by Michael Finkel. And this book is fun. If you want a true crime book that is fun and not scary or depressing, this is great. You get this story of these art heists of this man who is collecting fine art from museums and is just getting away with stealing so much. And it is so interesting to see how he did it, how he was caught, what happened to the art. Of course, some of it is heartbreaking to know that some of those items have been lost, but for a true crime book, it's just a really good time. This is a great one. If you don't read a lot of nonfiction, this is a good one to get you into it because it is so interesting and accessible. This book is Brave the Wild River, The Untold Story of Two Women Who Mapped the Botany of the Grand Canyon by Melissa L. Sevigny. It is telling the story of these two women in 1938 as they travel through the Grand Canyon, and I love this. I love the Grand Canyon. I loved hearing some of the history and the landscape, and this was really fun. And you know what it was so good for? It was a great primer for the book A Walk in the Park, which I am going to talk about in a little bit, but this was great to visit the Grand Canyon, see some of those places and how they looked historically, and it was just a really interesting time, as well as an interesting discussion on women's contributions to science and exploration. So this book is The Ghost Map, the story of London's most terrifying epidemic and how it changed science, cities, and the modern world by Stephen Johnson. And this is focused on the 1850s in London with these cholera outbreaks and how they were able to trace it back, figure out what caused it, and that breakthrough where they were able to solve why so many people were dying in certain sections of the city. This was super interesting to see how epidemics spread, how they were historically traced, and what that means going forward. It is also really an interesting read. This came out in 2006. It was really interesting to see what has changed in the past 20 years in modern time, because it really does try to outline what would happen in a worldwide pandemic, and you can kind of see what did and didn't pan out in 2020. So I thought this was a really interesting read, not only for the historical information, but also as a bit of a time capsule of what was thought in 2006 and how things have changed in the past 20 years. This book is American Kingpin, The Epic Hunt for the Criminal Mastermind Behind the Silk Road by Nick Bilton. And this is really engaging, fascinating true crime. So this book is following the story of Ross Ulbright as he launches his website, The Silk Road, and has this free market where anybody can trade anything, and it quickly becomes an illicit hub for illegal substances and weapons. And at a certain point, Rob is trying to put out hits on people he doesn't like. It just devolves very quickly and is super interesting. I thought this book was fascinating. I do think that you get to the end and find it very frustrating to find out that the current US president pardoned this man who obviously did a lot for getting drugs into many people's hands. So that may drive you nuts. So I think this book is just really, really interesting. This book is Against Technoableism, Rethinking Who Needs Improvement by Ashley Shew. And this is a really great book to open your eyes to what disability is. And the perspective that the author takes is that the future is disabled. There are going to be sicknesses in your own future. There is going to be climate change. There's going to be disasters. There are going to be things. And how can we make things more accessible to more people now? And we don't need technology to come in and fix somebody. We need more structural changes that can help everyone. And this is a really great book for looking at some disability activism, what needs to happen to help more people, and this was definitely worth picking up. For a very heavy read, we have Still Life with Bones, Genocide Forensics, and What Remains by Alexa Hagerty. And this is talking about an anthropologist in Latin America trying to unearth the truth about missing people, mass graves, and bring peace to family members who are in mourning. And this book was really difficult to get through, honestly, but it was really excellent and interesting to see the stories that our bodies tell after we have moved on. This book is Davos Man, How the Billionaires Devoured the World by Peter S. Goodman. It really goes into depth about how the wealthiest in the world are extracting value from everyone else, and it is the common person that is going to suffer. If you want any proof that a lot of the politicking is a distraction to allow the wealthy to do whatever they want, this book might make a good case for it. I think this book is really great if you want to know more about economic justice and how a lot of these powerful people and corporations really need to be held to account for what has happened to the everyday person. This book is The Urge, Our History of Addiction by Carl Erik Fisher. And this is exactly what you think it's going to be. It is going into the history of humanity and how addiction has been a thing since really the beginning of time, and how we have treated it has changed the outcomes. What are we labeling this as? What is the social stigma surrounding it? And it gives us a lot of the historical background as well as the author's own struggles with addiction and the lessons that he personally has learned through his own experiences. And so I thought this was a very interesting look at addiction and so relevant to so many people's lives. Now, this book is a sweet little book. It is Custodians of Wonder, Ancient Customs, Profound Traditions, and the Last People Keeping Them Alive by Eliot Stein. And This is following some lost crafts, the last few people who know how to make a certain kind of pasta, the last people who can make an intricate type of lace, the last people who know how to make a certain kind of bridge. These are these dying arts and these beautiful cultural gems of different places, and I love this. It gives a lot of magic to the world to know that a lot of that is continuing on, and just reminds me of the things that we desperately need to preserve. And since I've read this book, every time I travel, every time I'm reading about a new skill, different things about textiles, which is one of my favorite things, I am thinking about how it's a part of keeping that cultural heritage alive and keeping those traditions moving forward, and how important that is. I think there are some traditions that have been going on for hundreds of years, thousands of years, that we don't need to just let die. We have a lot that we can do to keep them going, and I really loved them. So this book is Matrescence on the Metamorphosis of Pregnancy, Childbirth, and Motherhood by Lucy Jones. And I keep recommending this book to all the mothers in my life, because not only does this book make me very appreciative for what they go through, I feel like there is a lot relatable to so many people that struggle between going from child-free to having a child, the changes that happen in your body, the changes that happen in your life, and how it is not properly supported and marked by society. And the idea of matrescence is it's like adolescence. In adolescence, you are going through so many changes physically, socially, and we mark that. We have quinceañeras, we have sweet 16s, we have graduations and parties and initiations. It is something that we try to mark and ease people into these different stages of life, but a lot of times that is missing in motherhood, and people need a little bit more grace and guidance through that transition. And so I thought this book was really lovely, not only in a way that it was relatable, but on ways that we can reimagine motherhood and that transition, and ways to create communities of support. Because we aren't meant to be mothers in isolation. We are meant to have communities there to support us and help us. I really love this. I do recommend it to anyone who is going to have a child, has a child. Not only if you are a woman, I think as a woman you may find a lot of things relatable, but if you are in a relationship with a woman and want to understand more how this transition can feel and affect her life, I think that might be worth a read. This book is Midnight in Chernobyl, The Untold Story of the World's Greatest Nuclear Disaster by Adam Higgenbotham. And this is exactly what it says. It is giving us a history of Chernobyl. It is really well researched, and it is interesting to see not only what happened in this disaster, but some of the effects that we still see in politics today. So I do recommend this not only for understanding an environmental disaster of the sort, but also for understanding world politics currently. Now, this next book was just such a heartfelt memoir. It is Hijab Butch Blues by Lamya H. This book is following Lamya's life in Southeast Asia, then the Middle East, then the US, and her struggling with learning that she is attracted to women, but also having such a deep love for the Quran and its teachings, and finding strength and joy through relating to the women of the Quran. I thought this was really beautiful. I think there's something very relatable about questioning your faith, but loving it and finding strength through the stories in the scriptures. In a series of essays where she talks about different women in the Quran and how they have brought her strength. This book is another one that has some elements of beautiful memoir writing. We have How to Share an Egg, A True Story of Hunger, Love, and Plenty by Bonny Reichert. this is about Bonny as a daughter of a Holocaust survivor and a chef and award-winning journalist. And she always said she would write her father's story, but always found it hard to start. And when she gets into understanding where her father came from, what his life was like, she really relates to him through food. It did cover her father's story, but it was also her story about how she could relate to him and what the effects were. And I think it was really well done. I love a good book where someone is searching out their family history and learning more about the people who came before and finding strength and inspiration from them. This book was When McKinsey Comes to Town by Walt, Bogdanich, and Michael Forsythe. And this is just going in and showing what happens at McKinsey and how they do not have the morals that they say they do. And so I thought this was really interesting, a good look at McKinsey, look at what the consulting firms do, and shows some of that hypocrisy that they have, saying, oh, we want to only do good, we're only going to do good things. But they spend their time trying to get more people to smoke cigarettes and propping up corrupt governments. And I thought this was a really interesting look into how, although McKinsey may help improve profits, they are doing that at the expense of real people. This book was a bit of a heavy one. It was My Fourth Time We Drowned, Seeking Refuge on the World's Deadliest Migration Route by Sally Hayden. This book is talking about the migration crisis, and it talks a lot about the abuses in these Libyan detention centers and how the UN is not actually helping, and it was really difficult. This one I did listen to, and there were some actual recordings of people locked in these detention centers, and it was really a difficult listen, but very eye-opening. Just highlighted an issue that feels so urgent and so important. And I really think that this is an important issue that we need to do more about. These next two books were both by Kevin Fedarko, and the first one is A Walk in the Park, the true story of a spectacular misadventure in the Grand Canyon. And this is talking about a through hike through the Grand Canyon that was made by Kevin Fedarko and his experiences, as well as the history behind the canyon. The other book was The Emerald Mile, the epic story of the fastest ride in history through the heart of the Grand Canyon. And this is talking about the Colorado River and a lot of the history behind it as well, but does not have Kevin's own personal experience in the book. I think for entertaining factor, I think A Walk in the Park was probably more interesting. I think that it was a little more compelling, and probably because Kevin was in it and you also just wanted to yell at him for being so stupid and unprepared. So I think you get that, but also I do think that some of the research into the different perspectives surrounding the conservation of the Grand Canyon was maybe a little bit better in A Walk in the Park, but that is not to say that the Emerald Mile wasn't also just fantastic. And I think reading both of these really gives you a great overview of the area and the beautiful nature writing and the commitment that so many people have to exploring the outdoors. So I really am so glad that I picked up both of these books this year. This book was The Other Olympians, Fascism, Queerness, and the Making of Modern Sports by Michael Waters. This book was really interesting, talking about the different trans and intersex athletes of 100 years ago and their lives in struggle, as well as the knee-jerk reactions and the lack of scientific measures that a lot of the sporting organizations have put in place to regulate women's sports. And so I thought this was really interesting and very timely. And And last of all, I did read King of Kings, The Iranian Revolution, A Story of Hubris, Delusion, and Catastrophic Miscalculation by Scott Anderson. And I did this as a buddy read with Tiffany, and I thought this was really interesting. I did not know anything about the Iranian Revolution going into this book, and I feel like I have a very good overview. It definitely was from the side of US politics and how they intersected with the Iranian Revolution. And so if you are looking for a broader perspective, that's not what this book is aiming for, but I do think it gave a lot of key information and really painted an interesting picture of politics, and you can see some of the same issues coming up today. So I thought this was a really well done and really well researched book. Okay, so 25 of my favorite nonfiction books that I have read this last year. If you have read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them. If you have read a great nonfiction book, let me know in the comments down below. And I hope you all have a wonderful 2026 and a great reading year. And I will see you all on the next one.